Thank you for finding the NSC podcast on YouTube. To find links for our online hospitality security training, check out the video description below. Enjoy the Nightlife Security Podcast.
This episode of Nightclub Security Podcast is brought to you by Black Diamond Radio by Custom Earpiece. Visit customearpiece.com.
Welcome to the Nightclub Security Podcast, a professional resource for the nightclub security industry. Whether you're a nightclub bouncer, guard, owner, or operator, this is the podcast for you. We're here to inform, educate, and entertain. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. This is the Nightclub Security Podcast. This is your host, Manny Marquez. I'm sitting down with nightclub security industry expert, Robert C. Smith. Robert, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, buddy.
How are you enjoying this weather?
It's just some sweet weather. It's 70, 75 degrees, no breeze.
Actually, a slight breeze I see outside. We're coming to you live from our studio here in Mission Hills, just a little bit north of downtown San Diego. Robert, wanted to talk about a couple of things. I posted the last podcast on our Twitter account and instantly got a barrage of responses.
And I told you, hey folks, if you listen to any of them, listen to this one, the one that we're going to be posting over the next 3 days on different outlets, because I told you that this would create an immediate feedback response.
The topic of last week's podcast was security guards, armed or unarmed. And we basically have a discussion about whether or not you should have armed security guards. And it's funny because you post that and people automatically assume that we're in favor of...
We're pro-armed guards.
Yeah.
Give a gun to every bouncer.
Which is not the case. I mean, if people would actually listen to the entire podcast, they would hear that towards the end. But, I guess any sort of response is a good response, right?
But, I would agree with that. And it's good, and then it kind of gets frustrating when they come out with something so quickly. But then you think, okay, this is exactly what I expected, is a visceral response from one or more people that will go, wait. I mean, boom, right on Twitter. This guy, what's his handle? Let's give him a shout out.
I think that was Nightclub Guru that lit us up.
And he had an immediate response of, no, you guys are wrong. There's no place for these guys. They guard casinos and vaults, not people. And, we want you to listen to the whole thing, brother.
Well, and definitely people are, entitled to their opinion.
But
which is fine and good, and we welcome any sort of discussion. But at the same time, I'd like to invite everybody before they actually post and determine that we've had an opinion or a stance on something, that they give the whole podcast a listen. I think that'd be good, right?
Absolutely, because at the end we really did tie it up, and we gave each of our own personal opinions, which were the same. And the podcast was about giving you, or someone who's thinking about it, what they should think about if they've never really given it thought. It wasn't saying, this is a gun issue. We think everyone should have a gun at all. So we appreciate the feedback. We're glad you chimed in quickly. We're glad you saw it and you follow us, and we really do. But please listen to the whole thing. I really think it helps people to listen to the whole podcast.
Yeah, which is kind of the point of having the podcast, right? They just listen to the first part.
We've had other responses like that on whether it's confiscated ID or whether it's dress code, where people give an initial response.
There's some hard opinions out there.
Yeah. They believe what they believe because that's what they believe. And it's just about opening your mind. And that's what I teach in my classes. Just open your mind. There may be another way to do it. We're not always right. We just want you to think there are other ways to possibly do things.
Or on top of not always being right, we would like to here's some other angles or perspectives on your experiences, and something that's constructive would be great.
Yeah.
Let's see, Robert. Beyond that, I know you had a kind of going back to just personal stuff. You recently moved.
Oh, and moving is never good. You told me about this, and every time I bring it up, or every time you bring it up, what are you doing? I tell you, and you keep rubbing it in that, it's one shoe, one box, one napkin, one dust pile under the bed, one more mattress, one more box, one more pot, one more pan. And you're right. I'll be living out of boxes for the next 5-6 months.
I absolutely hate moving. I think it's probably taxes, moving, and dying are probably the three worst things that we all have to go through. And I get so bad that I actually still leave stuff in boxes because I'm anticipating
Yeah.
I'm gonna
You're
have
gonna
to
move
move
again.
yeah, someday. So you're all settled in though.
I keep hoping that this will be the last move. And for those of you that don't know, it's not that I like to move. I was in the last place 5 years, and they sold it out from under me, and so I had to find something else. And I'm kind of living a dream right now by living on the beach in Mexico. I mean, literally on the beach, waves crashing all night. If you can deal with that, you can certainly deal with
It's not bad.
the lovely weather that I get to be in every morning when I wake up and every night when I go to bed. So it is tough in a house and moving, but still, I look out my window and take a walk and take a run.
I got to ask you, what did you? Where are your plants? All your garden,
Dude.
Did you lose your whole garden?
I left it only for. I've got another 3 weeks to be totally out. I'm working on that. I'm gonna have to adjust. All my Miracle Grow. Shameless plug, but that stuff is the bomb. Miracle Grow makes your stuff grow like crazy, and I'm going to have to really read the instructions about living right on the ocean because of the sea air. Not that anyone cares, but I'm doing quite a lot of growing on just different things.
I'm still looking for my herbs, by the way.
They're all dried and ready.
I still haven't seen them.
Okay. All right. You get 'em.
I was going to make some spearmint tea last night.
Man, it was good too.
Let's see, Robert. What else we got? Shout outs. You were in DC for a 1-day trip.
A 1-day turnaround from the West Coast.
That was a tough trip for you.
Man, graveyard out, up all day, into the night, arriving back in San Diego. So I left at about 10 o'clock in the evening after moving all day. Went to DC for a day on Thursday. DC Nightlife Association. Skip Coburn, hey, nice job, buddy. All the hard work you do for the DC Nightlife Association and the membership and the bars and clubs and restaurants out there. This guy is a tireless producer for this group in the small stuff, from setting up meetings like this one with Homeland Security and some of the MPD, Metro PD people talking about the terrorism awareness as it relates to nightclubs, to getting the Beverage Control Agency there, bringing myself and Pike Barber from Hospitality Insurance Agency out there. Just for a day, but it is a tough turnaround.
But you got back, picked you up from the airport. You looked a little weathered.
Thursday night. Well, I counted the hours from being up at 8 o'clock on Wednesday, flying out on the red eye Wednesday night, being up all day Thursday and getting back at 11.
No shower.
No. God, that was awful. I had to buy a toothbrush and some scope at the airport because it was just so bad the next morning.
Well, I'm glad to hear it was a good trip. Welcome back. So let's see, Robert. In the news this week, we got a story coming out of San Francisco.
Just a gentleman's club, Garden of Eden. There was a double stabbing. Play the news clip.
The search is on this afternoon for whoever stabbed 2 men inside a San Francisco strip club. KTV's Alex Savage is live with the key evidence police are working with. Good afternoon, Alex.
Well, Tori, good afternoon to you. We're told 2 men are wanted for this attack, and right now investigators with the San Francisco Police Department are going over surveillance video from both inside and outside of the Garden of Eden Club, trying to see if that video may show what happened here early this morning. San Francisco police started to get 911 calls just after 1 a.m. from this club that's on Broadway near Columbus in North Beach. Officers came here. They found 2 young men in their late teens to early 20s who'd both been stabbed in the stomach several times. Paramedics rushed them to San Francisco General. Police say both men were customers at the club. And a short time ago, police told me one of those men remains in serious condition while the other one is in much better shape.
So that's basically the gist of the story. I'll actually put that's a video. I'll put the link on our show notes.
There's a lot of things to that. And we're not gonna try to dissect every point that I'm sure many of you listeners have. But number one, I really feel that knives are becoming a pretty popular weapon during nightclub and bar fights or violence. Whether it's the news coverage of guns, it's just another avenue to get in that's easier to hide, easier to conceal. People often are letting them being carried in on their belt or on their pocket. But that was the first point. Second point was, the cops are going to do this investigation, and they're looking at the crime. Both these people survived, and if you remember listening to our podcast early on liability, you certainly have some exposure there. And, I would, as a consultant, I'd want to work with that club to cover their butt as best I could for the potential civil lawsuit that's going to come. The cops are going to do what the cops do. They're going to do what they have to do to collect evidence. That's a news story said. But what is the club doing to collect that stuff?
We call it putting yourself in a defensive posture.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you recall what night that was from? Was that from last night?
It was a Monday night, Monday to Tuesday. So Monday night at Tuesday morning at 1 a.m., Monday night. We don't know. And I think you're going to this. Was it crowded? Did they have plenty of guards? Was the guard in flip-flops and sitting at the front door on his phone texting?
So what I want to know is A, it being a slower night, how many guards were on? And then the second part of that is, on these off nights, people tend to get a little bit lackadaisical, and it's easy not to pay attention to what's going on. So
absolutely,
I'm just curious of it'd be good to find out how many guards were on and just exactly what were the circumstances surrounding the incident, because chances are there was going to be some cues, there was going to be some warnings that something was about to go down.
In our classes I've said this a lot, where I've asked my group, have you ever seen just a seriously random act of violence where a guy walks up to a guy at the bar and just punches him in the nose? Well, I would say that would be random.
Very rare.
It's extremely rare. You're going to have some posturing, some body language, some argument. Normally, look, I know some of the listeners are, well, I remember. Okay, I'll give you that. But think of the majority of issues you had in your bar that ended up with a stabbing. They weren't a random walk up to a guy and stab him in the gut. This was an argument probably. So there were some tells that led up to it. And Manny's point about, did they have enough guards? Had they had guards on the floor? And we're not trying to try this case over this podcast because we don't have that information. But those are questions that have to be asked.
Yeah, and it actually is, it's interesting that we come to that conclusion at the tail end of this story, because it's actually our topic for today, which we'll get into more. But it's how many guards should you have on? Going back just to the news story, and we didn't play it on the clip, but the remainder of that story talks about how the police department there in San Francisco just upped their enforcement, their numbers on that.
Over the past 2 years, I think they said, the article said something, I think crime had dropped in that area, violent crime had dropped in the area by 40%. And what that means is the increased patrols, increased arrests, increased physical presence of law enforcement, and I believe coupled with working with the guards in that area has really dropped crime over 40%.
But the other point of that is that even though there's this increased presence from the police department, the next piece of that puzzle is the guards and the training of those guards.
That's right.
And making sure that qualified, licensed, because this is in San Francisco.
Correct. State of California.
Guards are working on premise. And so that'd be another question of mine is was the guard on duty licensed?
Guard or guards, yeah. And the other thing I would add with that is, the police are human too, and they'll get complacent occasionally also. They'll get lackadaisical and forget things too. So typically they may be staffing 100% in that area on a Friday and Saturday night, because that's when most of the issues happen. It's a Monday night again, and maybe they're cut thin and their units are somewhere else at that time.
So for the guards listening out there, the ones working on the floors, just keep that in mind. When you're on your shift, anything can happen at any moment. Slow night, busy night, and there's got to be a level of attention and some vigilance when you're working, and keeping your eyes open, keeping your ears open, making sure that things are happening the way they're supposed to be happening. When you see the tells and the signs that something's about to go sideways,
even if it starts off with just an argument that you can calm it down, and because we're slow tonight, the manager may say, nah, let him stick around. We'll just keep an eye on him. And bam, it goes off again, and you end up with 2 people stabbed. I don't know that that's the case, but I do know that management on a slow night will try to keep that revenue coming in. This is a gentleman's club. We want people to have a nice time. Although violence is fewer, there are fewer occasions of violence at a gentleman's club, it can still happen. And risk versus reward has to be thought about, and allowing people to stay, risking they're going to get violent again.
Yeah, so as always, we take these news stories and we try to extract some sort of lesson or things to think about, and that's why we do them.
Yep.
So today's topic is number of guards. We're going to talk about,
and this is one that comes up all the time, and I believe in an earlier podcast we talked about doing this one early on about hiring and placement and training of guards, about the number of guards. And it's always a question. Doesn't matter if I'm a national show or a regional show. the question will come up, Mr. Smith, how many guards do you think I should have? Or what does the law say is the legal number of guards I should have? And that's where this podcast comes from.
All right, so we'll talk more about that. We're going to take a short break. Stick with us, and we'll be right back.
When Nightclub Security Consultants recommends radios to our clients, we recommend Black Diamond radios by Custom Earpiece. Why? They're the best in the business. Simple as that. Tired of the high cost of replacing broken radios? It's time to beef up your nightclub communications. The Black Diamond CE450 radio is the most durable radio on the market. Black Diamond designed and built this radio with nightclubs and bars in mind. Made for high noise environments, the CE450 is shock and water resistant and has a long-lasting battery. Your security team has a tough job. They need a tough radio. For 2 years, if they can break the CE450 radio, Custom Earpiece will replace it. Period. No hassles, no questions. Need more than just radios? CustomEarpiece.com is your one-stop shop. Radios, headsets, custom ear molds, earpieces, adapters. Just go directly to CustomEarpiece.com for all your radio needs. Got a question? Call Custom Earpiece during business hours, and you will always speak to a live person, ready to assist you. CustomEarpiece.com customer service is second to none. Get 10% off your purchase today. Just click through the banner on the nightclubsecurity.com homepage or the Nightclub Security Podcast show notes. Use promo code NIGHTCLUB7. That's nightclub and the number 7. Visit CustomEarpiece.com and order today.
All right, and welcome back, everybody. Today's show, we're going to be talking about how many guards is enough, which is a question we get asked a lot from our clients and people that we come in contact with.
And you know, Manny, it sucks because they want one answer. Oh, 8, 3, 19. You can't give an answer like that. None.
Yeah.
You just can't give an answer like that. And we'll talk about why.
So, Robert, let's jump into it. Where do you want to start with this topic?
Well, do you even need guards? I mean, you were an operator for a while. At a couple of your places you had them. At a couple of your places you didn't. And at the places you did have them, there were times when you didn't have any because of the time of day, the time of week, and I can understand that. But what we want you to do is be able to look at your program, your operation, and decide if you really need them. And that's where the discussion really must start when you get to the ratio of guards per guest or how many guards do I need. Do you really need them?
Well, I think a couple things come into play. One is your requirements. And so some state, local rules and regulations will mandate that you have a certain amount of guards.
And we know best, we know San Diego.
San Diego. So, for instance,
the city of San Diego.
City of San Diego, depending, and this is a condition that's attached to what's called your entertainment permit. So if you have entertainment, which in their eyes is any sort of DJ, live band, a music act,
karaoke, any entertainment.
So as long as you have that sort of activity taking place in your venue, you're required to have, and they'll give you a number. Sometimes it's 25, sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 75. It's kind of arbitrary, and it's whoever's writing
the standard that the Vice unit uses in San Diego is 1 per 50. And they'll say this: 1 State of California Department of Consumer Affairs licensed guard per 50 patrons, and that goes to your capacity rating. So simple formula by law in the city of San Diego: 50 guests equals 1 guard. You got a capacity listed at 200. That's 4 guards. But they don't really go into the definition of, does that mean all the time because my capacity is 200? Does it mean on Tuesday when I've got 35, I only need 1, or do I still need the 4? So there is some gray area there that the city puts out. They just want to see, typically, when these are mandated requirements around the country from cities, states, counties, whether it's your entertainment permit or your CUP, if they give you a mandate, they want to see that on your busy nights. They don't care on a Friday night if you've got 1 guard and your ratio is supposed to be 1 per 50 and you got to have 4 because your capacity is 200. When they care is on a Friday night when you've got 200 people that you have enough guards to handle what they think is necessary per that mandate. So on a Friday night, if your capacity is 200, have your 4 guards minimum. Remember, that's minimum.
So one of the things, we talked about day parts or the time of day. From a manager perspective, you chunk your shifts in your day into what we call day parts. So you have your morning, maybe it's a breakfast, maybe it's a lunch, maybe it's your happy hour crowd, then you go into a late night, then you have, that rolls into the 12 to 2 o'clock hours. So you kind of get a good sense of what your business flow is from week to week and month to month and year to year. And that's normally what gives you a good perspective on how many guards to have. So I think good operators have a pretty good handle on it. But I think there's a lot of challenges when it comes to determining the number of guards you need because there's an economic factor.
Bean counting.
Yeah.
Dollars and cents. I get it.
Yeah. So a lot of owners they'll skimp on their staffing of security because one, security guards normally get paid a higher wage than just your minimum wage. It becomes expensive. And so that's where they begin to curtail. What is your response when you have a client that is asking you about, well, what about the cost? What's your response to that?
The first thing I'll ask them is, number one, what we just discussed is there any sort of requirement? Research your CUP, your conditional use permit, your entertainment permit, or any other document the city, county, or state mandates you have this number of guards. Once you've done that, let's move on. Let's say there is no requirement. How many should I have? I say, are you running entertainment? What are your hours? For example, our partner client in DC, Shadow Room, they don't open until 9 o'clock at night, 3 days a week, sometimes 4 or 5, but typically it's not until 9 p.m. No food. It's all nightclub. So they're not worried about the day part so much. It's all night and it's all entertainment. They'll start off with 6. They'll jump up to sometimes 10 or 12. They run a full door, and they run a very good door with sometimes 4 and 5 guys out there handling their VIP entry, general admission entry, the velvet rope, the promotions list, plus another 4 or 5 roaming inside. And Steve 𝐏𝐸𝐿𝐞's a pretty good operator. He looks at the risk versus reward. He puts that number of guards there. Even though there isn't a mandate by the city, he could do it with none. But it's pretty obvious you need some sort of controls there, and that's where Steve looks at it as an operator with no mandate by the city or the district to run sometimes 6 to 10 guards, and he knows that because of entertainment. So that it's kind of a long-winded way of talking about what do you need to look at. Are you running entertainment? Do you have day parts or night parts, as you described them? Do you have a dance floor? Is it visible fully to the whole floor? Is there a second story? Is there a third story? Do you have an outside patio for smoking? Do you have an outside patio for dining or drinking and hanging out?
So
there are so many areas to look at when you consider how many I really need, because I'm going to make you think of it honestly. And when I do this, operators will look at me and go, wow, because it's an honest assessment. If you choose to do something different, it's okay. Just be informed why you're doing it.
Well, I want to back up here for a second because I think I want to pin you on this question of when an operator's main concern is the cost of having a certain number of guards on. What is your response to that?
Risk versus reward. And I will tell them a quick story of what do you do when you're going northbound on 95 or northbound on 5. We've said this on, I don't know, every other podcast, and you see a cop going southbound. You typically lay your foot off the gas and you slow down because you're worried about that ticket. The presence of a cop has slowed you down to make you be compliant with the law. And the same exact thing happens in the club for 99% of your guests. They see guards, they automatically will assume a better posture regarding your rules and regulations. Drunks don't get as drunk. Fights don't typically happen. People don't get as rude because they see some sort of consequence in who that guard is. So spend $80 a night or risk that $800,000 lawsuit. That's what I tell them. And you have to be able to really say to yourself, risk versus reward. Yes, I'll pay $15 an hour times 5 guards times 5 hours a night, because I know in the long run, in the back end, I don't see the insurance rates. I don't see the police visits. I don't see the perceptions from people that my venue is bad.
And see, my response would be similar, but my approach would be is if you're an owner or an operator, and the cost is the concern about how many guards to have. And, if you're an operator who's paying attention to the numbers, you're always paying attention to labor costs. That's one of your largest costs. There's the cost of goods sold, and then there's your labor costs. And then you'll get an operator who tries to skimp on the hours for security. To them, it's not a money-generating position. I have a bartender who makes sales. I have a server who makes sales. My door guy, he's just kind of sitting there watching stuff.
And if it's an inside door guy, I'm sorry to get in your train
So
of thought. Go
so
ahead.
let me just finish here. So my point is that I think operators, owners have the wrong perspective about what a guard's function is. To me, it's all inclusive. It's not your bartenders can't sell unless there's a safe environment. So you can't distinguish it as this is not a money generating position. It's all tied together. And so when people try to skip on the security aspect, I think they're doing themselves a disservice. One, because a guard can be a very good avenue for customer service.
Starting at the door.
Starting at the door. So he sets the tone. You have your guards roaming on the inside. If they're trained right, they can actually enhance the experience of the guest greatly.
And that means more revenue.
That ultimately means more revenue. I think also on the second part of that is that oftentimes owners don't utilize the manpower of a guard effectively and efficiently, because a guard just sitting by a door with his arms crossed and not doing anything is not adding to the business or the value of the business. Why not have guards roam and pick up glassware? Why not have them bussing? Why not have them running food? So start thinking of creative ways in which they're not only there in a security capacity, but they're also serving another function that ultimately helps the entire business.
And each of those functions you mentioned gets them to interact with the guests. Because if they're at a table picking up glassware, they get to evaluate that table. If they're running food, they get to evaluate the table. If they're sweeping up cigarette butts in the patio, they get to evaluate the guests. And that's what we want. We want them to evaluate while they're doing their job, because they can proactively solve a problem earlier than waiting for it to erupt.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, just people don't think outside the box. And there's a lot of people that are doing it right. There's a lot of, especially here in San Diego, I think we have a lot of good operators that know how to have a position, have multiple functions rather than just one. But I have been in clubs, in bars, where the guard is just the guard, and that's it. The guy just stands there, and that's all he does.
Waits for a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, the wrong approach, because you're paying this person. You're probably paying them $10, $12, $15, $16, maybe $20 an hour.
And that operator is at the minimum. So if they're looking, okay, I can do this job tonight. It's a Tuesday. I'll have one guard, and he'll work the door, the floor, the trash, the tables, the patio, the parking lot. Because it's a Tuesday, and we're only going to get 50 total people in here. And it's going to cost me too much to put 2 guards on.
Yeah, so I think operators often have the wrong or the incorrect perspective on exactly the role of these individuals. And then when you think of them as a cost, it's not just a one-line item that you can scratch. It's their purpose there, and them being there is part of the whole function of everybody.
Right.
You couldn't, it's easy just to say, I'm going to call a guard off today, but you would never think I'm going to call all my bartenders off today.
Well, and one of the anecdotes that I use in my classes are, when guards think about their own position, you've got to put yourself on a little higher pedestal. You're a necessary part of the business. I don't ever call guards a necessary evil. I'll let the operator say, hey, you know what, if you could do this job without guards, wouldn't you do it without guards? And of course the answer is always yes. But then I say, now, is that realistic? And they'll say no. Okay, if you know it's not realistic to do the job without guards, give yourself the best chance to succeed. Here we go again. Now you know you need them because they're necessary part of this business. Why do we shoot for the minimum? Since when did shooting for the minimum level of guards, or the minimum level of anything, be the best way to go about it? Hey, Manny, you're a wonderful son of mine, and I want you to shoot for the C. Get that C in high school. Don't worry about A's or B's. Just shoot for the C. Get the minimum needed.
Got it, Dad.
The minimum? So here's that same operator. He's got a 200 capacity. It's a Friday night. He's got the minimum 4 guards. Well, there's one at the door. There's one helping him in the line. That means there are 2 roamers. I've got my minimum. I'm fine. Well, now you have a fight. Your 2 door guards come in to help break up the fight of 6 people. Who's watching the door? Who's in the patio? Who's watching the bathroom? Who's in the parking lot? You did the minimum, though. You're okay. You can rationalize that and say, I had the minimum number of guards. That's what I was supposed to have. That's what I had. No, pal. You had the minimum necessary. So when we started this topic, I told you it was very difficult to give you a number. We talked about the legal ratios. The industry standard would be the next thing that you have to look at. In our industry, the nightclub and bar industry, the legal standard is one thing, and then the industry standard is another. So let's just say you're going to go industry standard because there's no city requirement for you to have 1 per 50 patrons. The industry standard, coincidentally, is the same thing, 1 per 50 or 1 per 75. And this is not San Diego, this is nationwide. So let's go on the high end, 1 guard per 75 guests. Capacity of 200, you need 3.5 guards. So you dummy it down, do the minimum, you're going to do 3. So you've met the industry standard with 3 guards. But let's look at that realistically, and I hope you're thinking about this. I need you to think about it. You're running your door. That's one of your 3 guards. Now you got 2 rovers, but you got a patio, a parking lot, an upstairs, a downstairs. You got a different sight line on your dance floor for karaoke night on a Thursday night. You still got your 3 guards. Is that really enough? Let's be honest. Well, I've never had a fight. What about when you do? Are you going to have enough to provide that reasonably safe environment for these people in your club? You shot for the minimum. And that's what that's in my opinion, what gets too many operators in trouble by shooting for the minimum, because that's what they're stuck with.
Yeah, and I think that that sort of philosophy generally, if that spills into security, that's probably going to be spilling into how you do things overall. And what I'm trying to say is that if I'm cutting corners on security, I'm probably cutting corners elsewhere. And I think that it's
telling guys they got to do training, not paying them. Telling guys to get their own shirts, not buying them.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, there's operators out there who operate like that, which is their right. It's their business.
And I can understand it.
But I would say that if you operating in that fashion, you're probably not taking full advantage of the potential of your business because you're not putting the resources in the right places. And that would be my comment. So, Robert, just to backtrack a little bit. So, there's the legal requirement of numbers, and this is what is imposed to you by either state or local laws.
Correct.
There's the industry standard, which is basically it's the unwritten rule that's courts go by, basically.
Yeah, and that kills me all the time when an attorney knows what that means, and the attorney will say, well, Mr. Smith, where's that written? And I got to be honest and say, it's not written. It's the industry standard. It's what people do. It's an unwritten law.
Yeah, it's
an unwritten rule. It's the norm within this industry, a 1 per 75 ratio. Some will go to 1 per 100.
It's like walking down the sidewalk. When you have 2 people coming together, I'm going to go to the right, and they're going to go to their right, so we don't bump into each other.
The movie reference, A Few Good Men, how did you find your way to the chow hall? I don't know, because it's not in the policy manual.
Yeah.
I just follow the crowd. It's the norm. That's what we do. So in our industry, just because you do it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it perfect. If you need more, don't be afraid to spend the money to get more and be above the standard of care nationally, be above the standard locally, be above the legal standard, even if you're only required to have 4. You had 6, and we'll talk about that too.
I'll go a step further out, and I would even say that not having enough guards, not only for that actual shift, will cost you money, but potentially cost you thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars in the long run.
Well, we know of a couple of cases. We won't use any names, but if their permit required to have 4, and they had 4, but the industry standard required they had 5 or 6, the layout of their venue required 5 or 6 or 7, but they went with the legal standard. We know of a couple of cases where that left so many loopholes. I'm sorry, not loopholes, but holes in the security program, the safety of the venue, that we saw, and I have video of a guy climbing over a patio rail. We've got fights that occur on dance floors. We got people falling downstairs because you went with a minimum and didn't have the correct coverage to keep people reasonably safe in your bar.
All right, so what's the next part of this?
So the next place we want to go to is what you really need. And now you have to take into consideration all the variables of your club. The number of doors, number of exits, patio, parking lot, combined bathrooms, male and female, right next to each other with a walkway where people have to go and congregate in that area. 1 bar, 2 bars, a beer tub, upstairs, downstairs, a DJ accessible area to the public so they get to go up and walk through the dance floor, and a Friday night, and your capacity is at 285. So let's just round it to 300 to make it easy. So we can easily say that our legal standard, if we use a 1 per 50, would be 6. We need 6 guards. Okay.
That's the minimum.
And that is the minimum, Manny. And if we want to even skimp a little more, let's go with the industry standard. We have no legal standard. Our city doesn't require anything. Let's go with the industry standard at 1 per 75. We're down to 5 guards. But now let's take into consideration the variables. As a good operator, you got to at least consider them. You have a door. You have an exit. That's 2 guards.
Front door, back exit.
Front door, back exit. And you've got to staff them. So that's 2 out of your 6. We'll use the high number, 6. That leaves 4 for your floor. You've got a hallway where the bathroom is constantly congregated with males and females, where there's touching, pushing, shoving. It's an area that needs to have attention. Let's put 1 guard there, and that leaves you 3. You've got an outside patio area where there's smoking and TVs, and people will sometimes sit out there the whole night to be out of the noise of the band or the DJ. Let's put 1 out there. And now you're down to 2 left to roam your floor because you don't want them roaming alone.
Did you say you had an upstairs?
Now let's throw in you got an upstairs.
So
now you've divided.
Now you got 1 upstairs, 1 downstairs.
And you're at your minimum. Because
so those 2 guys are basically, in essence, probably responsible for 2/3 of the crowd. So that's, if it's at 300,
yep.
They're looking after 200, 250 people.
It's a hard decision, operators and managers. I know it is because it is bean counting. Manny was a bean counter. He managed. It is what it is. But now let's bump it up a little bit. Let's put 2 at the door because you're doing IDs, wristbands, cover charge. You got a line. You got a queue. You got a VIP entry, and you got people on the list.
Well, if you are at 300 capacity, you're going to need 2 at the door, 1 checking IDs, 1 doing counts.
So there's 2 to 3 guards for your door to do it safely, securely, the best you can do it with 3 at the door. Now let's give yourself your upstairs, downstairs. Let's just say we're going to put 2 up and 2 down. That's another 4. Now we're at 7. We've got 1 stationed at our funnel area by our bathrooms. That's 8. We've got 1 in our patio. That's 9. What am I missing? And we've got our DJ dance area where we're going to put another 1 along with our roamers that are also going upstairs, downstairs with the other 2. I would run 10. And still you might have holes.
Yeah, I think I mean, as far as part of it too from a operational standpoint is as a manager, my thing would be okay, so you have the standard, and it would generally be 1 per 50. Once you have that in place, then you start considering where your other areas of need. And then the third part that would play into it is my comfort level, which would be when I am working on the floor, what do I feel comfortable? If I feel like I'm stressed because there's not enough eyes on the floor or what's happening that night, then I'm not going to have a good shift. And then the last part of it is what is my team? Are they stressed? And if they're in a position to where there's just too much going on, then you run into a whole nother situation to where you have a stressed security staff who's liable to react in an improper manner when something does happen. And there's not that force in numbers, and you're just inviting more problems.
They don't have time to think. They don't have time to wait. All of a sudden, when there is a reason not to hurry, they hurry because they know they have no cover. They have no one else to help them. One of the clubs I've worked with, they got so used to doing things on their own. When they had enough people, after some training and working with management to get them, 4 extra guards, they continued to do things alone. And it was a whole different training that had to go on to change their mental focus. And the bottom line was they were so used to being understaffed, they would walk out 1 or 2 guys alone. And that may be fine, and you may be listening and saying, well, Robert, you're full of crap. 10 guys for a capacity of 300? I'm sorry. I'm trying to give you the best chance to win and succeed and not get in that civil lawsuit. Remember what we said. Upstairs, downstairs, dance floor, a beer tub, front door, patio, VIP entry, funnel for the hallway. You need those guards. You may never have an issue, and what do you know? The reason you don't have an issue with that many guards is because you have that many guards.
Yeah, and I think that, going back to the point of guards being stressed out. I don't know how many times I've spoken to guards of clients that we've worked with, or guards that just come for the PSO training, and they'll mention that they're surprised when they learn about this idea of an industry standard, because a lot of them will turn around and tell you, oh, there's one guy or there's two guys working and we'll have 200 people in the whole place. And I'm just imagining if I was a guard in an environment to where I had to look after 200 people, 100 apiece, that would be highly difficult. It'd be very difficult. It'd be very stressful. I don't think I'd work at a place like that.
And it's hard. I mean, you end up having to learn to do things alone when you should be doing them with a partner. Here's another number. If you want to use a number to figure out this way, use a 1/35 ratio. So a 1/35 with our same scenario would give you 8.5 guards. Now, it's not 10, but it certainly isn't 6. You kind of split the difference by changing your number. It will give you a better chance to succeed. There is no formula that would say, given your layout, there's a client in Sacramento. She ran a really cool square sports bar, square with a small horseshoe bar, pool tables, a little small dance area where they would have a 2-person band come in, and she ran it typically on a Friday or Saturday with 2. Well, she had several issues over the course of several months. Brought me in, we did some training, I evaluated what she was doing, we added 2 extra guards on Friday and Saturday. She didn't have another fight for 7 months. She didn't have another fight for 7 months with 4 guards. Her capacity was only 180. 4 guards. Now, she was at a standard there, neither put on by the city or put on by herself. She was at the industry standard, but that 4, those extra 2 on the floor, saved her countless bad altercations because she saw the value of spending for 2 extra guards rather than covering the expense later.
Yeah, and I think another thing to consider when we're talking about the amount of guards is also not only the logistics of it and your guards feeling or not being stressed, but another aspect of it is the perception of the guest and their feeling of, I feel safe when I come here. If you're running a club to where you're skimping on your security and your guest doesn't feel safe, more specifically women, because women go to, we both know that women go to places because they feel safe. Is one of the aspects. If they're not feeling safe, you're just losing business on that end as
every
well.
expert out there would tell you that if you bring women in, men will come. I mean, that's just the way
where the skirts are, the wallets will follow.
There you go. And it's true. It's absolutely factual. I did a study. I did a survey at San Diego State. It proves that women will go to a place because they feel safe there. And how do you make it safe? You don't let them get manhandled. You don't let them get grabbed. You don't let them get bothered by men. You don't let men just walk up to them on the dance floor. I mean, these things happen every night in clubs and bars around the country. But if you have the security staff, correct numbers, correctly trained, women will feel safer just by having them in the room.
And I think also for operators, because it does come down to a cost. You know, it is a numbers game, and managers have to deal with these things in many aspects of the business. So this is just another one too.
Let me throw this in because I'm sure we're going to get some feedback as we have in the past with some of our topics. We didn't mention if you have certain nights. For example, if you're doing a country western night, if you're doing hip hop night, if you're doing beer pong or any of these other college night type of things, if you are expecting a higher number of people that are going to be pre-partying, they're going to be pumped, they're going to be charged up for whatever the group that's coming in, be prepared. And if that means you have 2, 3, 4 more guards, then have 2 or 3, 4 more guards. You got to remember that if you're cramming people in and your capacity is 300, you normally hit about 200. But you know tonight on a Friday night with the band you have, the music you're playing, the artists coming in, you're going to hit 3 and have a line and probably go to 350, push that envelope. You better be prepared. That means, well, we normally run 6. Well, let's run 12 tonight. It's a one-night deal. You're making the money at the door. You're making the money at the bar. Why not be extra safe tonight? And it's not about gangs. It's not about motorcycle riders. It's not about cowboys or military. It's about being prepared for what your crowd is.
And I think one more on top of that, one more layer on that is, you said the type of entertainment. I think also the type of night or the event or the holiday, because we all know that holidays will bring out the amateurs. And, you know, I would always staff up like on your Halloweens, your New Year's Eve.
Why would you put more guards on those nights, Manny?
he just knows stuff. I mean, the people who go out on those nights, generally, they go hard. They go fast.
The regulars go out,
Well,
but you got the rookies, too.
You got the rookies, yeah. So, it's amateur night. We call it amateur night. So these are generally people who don't know how to behave in bars, and chances are more likely that something's going to happen.
So doesn't it make sense? You're preparing yourself for what you can expect. You may never have a problem, but you staff another 2 or 3 guards that night just in case, because you expect
And
it.
I tell you what, as a manager or as somebody who's working that night, it makes your job a lot easier and less stressful.
Yeah,
And if I'm less stressed, then everyone else around me is less stressed.
absolutely.
And my guest is having a better time.
Right.
Anything else you wanted to
We'll tie it up.
Tie it up?
So we get the legal standard.
put the bow on?
Put the bow on it. Get the legal standard. We got an industry standard. And then you have to do a self-assessment of your venue. And there's no easy way to do it because there's no book that says it. Not yet. There's no book that says you have to do it this way or you should do it this way. You've got to honestly look at your venue. And you got to take out your bias that, well, I'm a good manager. I'm on top of things. Take that out of the equation. Look at your venue honestly and say, should I have a guard there? And if you think you probably should, try it. I guarantee you'll see a difference. And that kind of rounds it out, where you get your legal, you get your industry standard, and now do an assessment of your own venue. And we named, I think, 7 of the different things you might look for that might cause you to increase your number of guards, from the music to the small walkways to the DJ booth being accessible, the beer tubs, separate bars, separate floors, no communication, no radios, no sight lines. Those are all things that lend themselves to having an increased number of guards.
And if costs are your consideration, because they always are, consider multitasking.
Given those guards other titles. Remember, they're not just guards. Make them employees. So they're picking up glassware. What were some of the things you said?
You got people bussing tables, picking up glassware, running food, attendance on the restroom side. Get creative in what you give them as far as responsibility, because you'll get more bang for your buck out of them.
Their primary responsibility is security, but they're tasked with doing everything else.
The multiple functions that they're performing will increase guest interaction. If you train your staff right, hopefully that is a positive guest interaction, which in turn will create a better atmosphere and better business.
And if they're watching out for things proactively, you obviously have fewer problems.
Yes. I would also say that cost being a concern, get creative as far as your end times. You ramp up through the night. You don't need, obviously, and this is kind of obvious, but I'll state it. You don't need 10 guards on at 7 o'clock. Maybe you have 2 starting at 7. You bring another 2 on at 7:30, and you roll it in, and then you roll them out if the night dwindles. So get creative with the scheduling. I think that for part of this too is experimentation. See what works.
One of the things that I found that worked, and watch, we'll try this with a couple of our clients. Okay, we know you're running 7 guards. Your capacity is 190, and you're running 7 on a Friday night. Hey, guards, let's answer honestly. Do you feel safe? Would you like to have more guards, or do you feel you have enough to do the job safely? And I'll be damned, they'll be honest with you, owners, managers, if you ask them that. Because when you ask them and you've been doing it with 4, and you've always felt you should have 6, but it's about the money, think of the things Manny said about the comfort level, the savings on expenses, multitasking, and all of a sudden you throw 2 more guards in the mix. All of a sudden these guards are having a much better time because it's easier to do the job and it's safer.
Yeah, and I think that if you do it properly, you'll actually make more money in the long run, having more people on hand, having more hands on deck. One thing that I'm going to add, Robert, is also consider the staff that you have, and are they qualified? Are they hardworking? If you got a bunch of, I'm going to say it, dipshits working for you, of course you're going to have more dipshits on.
Yeah.
Rather than, if you have some really sharp, intelligent individuals who are hypervigilant, who can keep your venue safe, you'll need less of them. So that's another consideration. And the last part of that, to put everything on top, is, are you training them properly?
Correct.
And if you're training them properly, you can probably do with less because you have a better team. You have gone through the drills. You're on the same page. You understand, less problems.
But we don't want you to get in the mindset that, okay, they just told me that I needed, if I do the industry standard at 1 per 75, and if I need another 3 on top of that. So let's say I'm running 8 to be hypervigilant, but I train my guys excessively well. I hire extremely well. Let's move back down to 5. That's not what we're saying. You may need 10, but if you sit with 8 and they're doing a great job, you've saved yourself 2 bodies because you've done a good job with these 8. Don't get back down to that comfortable norm of, look, and this is one of the biggest problems. Manny and I have talked about this. I don't mind a guard on the edge of the dance floor where I've had 6 different fights standing there doing nothing. He's standing there watching. I don't mind that. Instead of no guard there, because in my mind as an operator, he's doing nothing, so I don't need him. No, he's doing something. He's slowing you down on the freeway when you're going down 95 by standing there.
All right, Robert, I think that was a lot of information. I think the conclusion is that don't skimp. It's going to cost you in the long run. Your main objective is
and remember I'm sorry, go ahead. Main objective.
Keeping everybody safe, avoiding issues, keeping yourself out of lawsuits.
And that's the point I was going to make. This area right here is one of those points that attorneys look for to sue. Inadequate number of guards. Had you had enough? What was reasonable? What you should have had? They're going to second guess you. So why not be ahead of that game and have not just the legal standard, not just the industry standard, but be above the standard and have the appropriate number of guards?
Absolutely. All right, Robert, good topic. I think we're going to take a little bit of a break here. When we come back, we'll just wrap up the show. So stick with us, and we'll be right back.
If you like our show, visit nightclubsecurity.com for more information and access to free resources. Remember, that's www.nightclubsecurity.com.
Alrighty, and welcome back. Robert, we got, let's see here, some announcements to make.
Doing some traveling again, buddy. Got Miami coming up, sponsored by Hospitality Insurance Agency, Pike Barber again. Hooked us up with the Opium Group down there in Miami. We've done some large groups already, but we'll be there in Miami the 5th and 6th.
So we're actually doing 4 venues.
For the Opium Group venues, you're right. And we'll divide them up into 2. So Monday, Tuesday, do a session. Wednesday, Thursday, do another session. I'll be back in San Diego Friday night sometime. Following week, leave on Sunday, be in D.C., working with Penn Social on with 5 of their venues in D.C. That's the main venue.
What are the dates of D.C.?
The 12th and 13th of May, and then the 14th and 15th of May. That's all for Penn Social. But we're also going to do an additional class there at Shadow Room, and that's on the 12th and 13th from 5 p.m. until 9:30 p.m. in D.C.
So for the D.C. listeners, that's an open training, the National Host Program. If you're looking to register for that. What else, Robert?
Week after that, I'm in Canada. Gonna do something I haven't done in a while. Get a toque. Be in Edmonton. Responsible Hospitality Edmonton is having their annual conference, and that'll be on the 20th and 21st. And I'll be up there. I'll be on a panel discussing some things with some other groups, other people up there, and that should be nice. I've never been to Edmonton, but I've worked with this group before. It's part of the a spin-off group of the Responsible Hospitality Institute, and that's Jim Peters' group.
I'm really interested to hear that trip's going to go and what comes of that. Let's see. That's it for the announcements. If you have questions that you'd like to write to us, you can email us at questions@nightclubsecurity.com. Robert, to find us on Facebook, they would search
Nightclub Security.
And on Twitter
at Bouncer Coach.
There
and
you go.
We love the feedback.
You can also find us on YouTube. We have some samples of our online training. You would search Robert C. Smith in YouTube, and that should bring up the channel. I think that is about it. Oh, I know. What else? Share us.
Oh, yeah.
Share us with a friend. Share us with a coworker.
Our numbers are increasing pretty good, and we like that. So please share us.
Yeah, we'd like to grow this community. So if you know of somebody that could use this information, please pass this along. I think that is about it for today's show. I'd like to thank you for joining us and listening in. That is all for us. This is Manny Marquez.
I'm Robert Smith.
Be nice.